Hello everybody, welcome to another watercolor tutorial. We're going to be painting this beautiful and very easy bouquet of tulips. And the first thing you want to do is actually sketch these guys out. So I'm going to show you really quickly how to do that. So you can paint as many as you'd like. I'm going to be painting 3 here because I want 3 different colors. And you're going to just basically draw a U shape, and then you're going to connect the left side all the way down in an arch, and then the other side is going to connect to that, and then you're just going to paint an upside down U like so to complete the tulip. And we're just going to extend the stem of the tulip downwards, and then once you know you've drawn, if you're also going to do 3, you're going to connect them downwards like this, and then we're going to add some very, very stretched out S-shape petals to our tulips, like this. And it's just as easy as that. Okay, so once you have that drawn out, we can go ahead and start the painting part of our tutorial. So essentially, I'm just starting out with like an orange color here. I'm gonna mix in actually a little bit of red into that orange to create almost a peach color. And what we're going to do is paint the entire portion here, like these 2 sides. We're going to connect them. Like so. And you can just add a pop of color at the bottom here, like super hyper pigmented. Let's zoom in a little bit there so you could see. So I'm just taking a highly pigmented color and just dabbing it at the bottom, and that should naturally sort of spread upwards there. And I'm also going to do that because I just want to very gently separate my 2 petals from one another. So I'm just painting a little line going downwards. And we're gonna let this dry as we move on to our second tulip here. So my second tulip is going to be an intense red. So I'm just mixing my colors here. I'm adding some like almost a maroon to my red because I want it to be quite an intense red. And we're just doing the exact same thing. I'm using a size 14 Grumbacher brush here, and in some sections like here, if I was a little bit more patient, I would grab my liner brush or my quadruple 0 detail brush by Winsor & Newton, all of which are linked in the description, of course, if you're interested in adding them to your collection. So that's nice and intense there. And I'm just gonna take some of this color off, and I'm just doing this by dragging my brush over it, rinsing it on a paper towel, and just repeating the process until I'm happy with the color. I actually quite like how that looks because it looks like it's highlighted, or there's light reflecting off of some of the petals. So I'm actually going to go back and do that for my orange tulip as well. Just like that. Ooh, I really like that. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the last tulip, and this one is going to be a nice dark yellow. So we're doing the same thing, I should have erased my pencil lines here because the yellow isn't opaque enough to cover them up. So keep that in mind before you start painting over your pencil. Usually I'm pretty diligent with that, but I got a little bit excited, I guess you could say. So I'm actually just adding a teeny bit of orange to my yellow there, and I'm just adding it because I want to create some, not highlights, but I guess shading in some areas, and I really like how the orange looks. So again, I'm just doing the same thing I did with the other two, where I'm lifting off the color, dabbing it on a paper towel until I'm happy with it. Just adding some of the orange back in here because I took off a little bit too much. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let these completely dry before we move on to the next step. Okay, so now that our tulips are hopefully completely dry, we are going to fill in these center petals of each one, and I'm going to make each one a little bit lighter than the color that I used to actually paint them. So for this one I used sort of a mix between an orange and red. So I'm taking that color and I'm watering it down heavily. And then I'm just going to paint it on. I'm gonna actually switch to my liner brush here, oops. Just so I can have a little bit more control over what I'm doing. Now that is a little bit too dark and it's a little too orange. So I'm going to take some more pigmented color and I'm going to just very lightly dab it in that point there, and I'm going to let that spread out, and that's going to create this nice blended gradient effect, hopefully, if this isn't too dry. You can kind of gently help it along if you find that it's not spreading by itself properly. So while that one is doing its thing, I'm just going to move on to the next one here. Now I can feel that I have way too much water, so I'm just going to use a bigger brush to pick some of that water off here. That's better. And again, taking a lot of pigment and just dabbing that center portion, and this will kind of bleed upwards there and create a nice effect. There we go. And finally, we want to do the exact same thing for our last one here. And actually, just because I noticed, I'm going to just quickly erase that very harsh pencil line. And again, I'm going to take quite a bit of pigment and just dab it in the center there to help it along. So while these guys are drying, we are going to move on to the stem portions of our tulips. I was gonna start with my stems, but because I'm right-handed and I'm likely to smudge the stems, I'm actually going to start with the leaves of my tulips. So you're just going to follow the pencil marks of your leaves. You're going to fill these guys in. Use whatever thickness of brush that you're comfortable with. I'm just using the size 14 for kind of the main portions, and I'm going to go back in with a liner brush or a detail brush for some of the ends, just because I have more control. So yeah, now I'm going to grab this guy and I'm just going to do the little point here. Like that. And just clean up this area here. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the second leaf. Okay, and to spruce this up a little bit more while it's still wet, I'm going to add a little bit of black to my green, just to darken it up. And I'm going to paint just a portion of it. So like the left side, I'm gonna border it with this darker green, because I want to make it look like there's a shadow underneath. I'm gonna blend this out because I see that it my watercolor might be a little bit too dry, and so it's not blending properly with the rest of the leaf. So I'm just helping it along here. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and take, I'm gonna actually do the stems now of my tulips. So I really recommend using a liner brush for this part. You could cheat and just use a really fine tip green marker. Okay, so I'm just gonna go in on the last petal here. And that is basically it. You can alternatively also go in and outline the petals in the same way that we penciled them in with like a fine tip black marker or pen if you want even more definition. But if not, these are our cute little tulips. You can use this as a Mother's Day card and write like a Mother's Day greeting up here. But if you enjoyed this tutorial, it would really help me if you clicked like on this video, left a comment, and of course don't forget to subscribe to my tutorials for weekly watercolor lessons. Thanks guys!